going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us here for, I think, our fourth or fifth iteration of the Drawn Out Conference. For those that are unfamiliar with what this is a group of early, young art, higher ed educators that are coming together collectively to learn from each other about different ways and strategies that we use drawing to sort of spark our creative output in our studio. And we think about drawing expansively. And the drawing is, the conference is sort of considered a drawing in its own right. We've kind of declared, or we sort of proclaimed that we've agreed. No, I forgot how. What did we say? What did we? We decided to be undecided. So kind of following in the spirit of the Exquisite Corpse, that we're each sort of feeding off one another. This conference is mutating and transforming each iteration. So the format is these 7 young art professionals each have a turn where this portfolio of drawings is visiting each of their campuses. And these campuses are sort of like in, centered around Ohio region. And as this portfolio of drawings goes to each institution, that host artist of that institution is also giving a presentation about their work or about how drawing is influencing their work or whatever they want, really. So this time around is Emmeline Solomon, who is an artist educator working at Albion College in Michigan, holds an MFA from Washington University, St. Louis, BFA printmaking from Maine College of Art, and a cup of coffee is usually in her hands at any given time. Right now, Emmeline, cup of coffee?
This is throat coat tea because there is 20% humidity in this building. So
okay, all right.
In order to speak, I need it, but almost always this is coffee.
All right, well, Emmeline, thank you so much for participating. Some of the images have been posted on our Instagram page, Drawn Out Conference Instagram page. You could just do a search in there, it'll come up. But otherwise, we're archiving these presentations and each installation on our website, the drawnoutconference.com. So please make sure you can access that for the archive and resources. And otherwise, I'm handing it over to Emmeline. Thanks so much for joining us, Emmeline.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I also want to say thank you to everybody that is here. I know it is the end of a very long semester, and I super appreciate your time. You're also going to see me struggle with technology for about 1 second. Hopefully only 1 second. Present. All right. Everybody can see my screen? Cool. Okay, we're doing this. Technology is not my friend. So thank you for being here. Also, big thanks to the Drawn Out Conference for including me in this project. I'm very excited about it in general. Before I get into the actual talk part of this, I do want to say that I'm gonna show work of mine on the screen. You can tell it's mine when there's no attribution. When there is an attribution, it's somebody else's or it belongs to something else. I have clocked this in at about 27 minutes, so it's a very short talk. You can ask any question you want after the body of the talk. I want to be clear that you can literally ask me anything about anything that's on the screen, but just wait until the end of the talk. And there's plenty of time for Q&A, or if you want to fight me about sandwich stuff, which is going to come up in a second. Okay, so that being said, every image that I'm going to show you today, I consider a drawing. And I'm going to attempt to do 3 things. I'm going to attempt to draw you through this talk, draw connections, and eventually draw to a close. In short, I'm going to tell you a story. So, in the spring of 2018, the most commonly posed question to me as a professor was, is a hot dog a sandwich? The question was due to this popular meme, which is pictured here. For those of you who don't know, it is an alignment chart on which a bunch of different food items like Pop-Tarts, hot dogs, classical sandwiches, and burritos were pictured. Your agreement on whether or not each item was a sandwich determined your alignment on 2 axes, ingredient and structural. You could go from traditionalist to radical sandwich anarchy. I'm showing you this before we start so that you will understand where I'm coming from here. And perhaps to no one's surprise, I fall under what would be considered radical sandwich anarchy. I believe a Pop-Tart is a sandwich because it's some goo between two pieces of starch. And again, this would be a great thing to fight me about later in the Q&A section. Okay, we're there. An imaginary drawing alignment chart would fall under the same intersection of both structural and ingredient Red Bull. This is important to know going forward. And now that we have that established, today I'll be talking about 3 aspects of drawing and types of drawing that I use in my practice and ways in which I orient my thinking around those types of drawing. Again, please keep in mind my location on the sandwich alignment chart as I say the word drawing. The definitions of each section header are pulled directly from the dictionary definition of the word drawing, not from the words that are referred to on the slides. They're things that I think apply to the ideas that are on the slides. So the first one is implied line. The definitions that I have are to produce a picture or diagram by making lines and marks, especially with a pen or pencil on paper, and of a chimney flue or fire to allow air to flow through in and upwards freely so that a fire can burn. Okay, so in May of 2006, Zay Frank, and if you are not online enough or you're not old enough to remember, God forbid, Zay Frank was one of the original YouTube creator people who did a mix of kind of strange, funny, and sometimes profound interventionalist art on the platform. The platform, which at the time had no advertising or revenue options. So it was very much not what it is right now, which is a career. Anyway, so in 2006, he issued a challenge in an episode of the show to create the first Earth sandwich in history, which consists of 2 pieces of bread on opposite poles of the Earth. The first official successful Earth sandwich was one created when 2 baguettes were placed on the ground, one in Spain and one in New Zealand. 2 points on a line of endless possible pieces of bread, existing in our minds around what is visible, simply a baguette on the ground. With this baguette on the ground, also the knowledge, belief, and hope that on the other side of the entire world, there is another baguette on the ground, and another human being with the same hope, belief, and knowledge, trusting you. The ideological sandwich line between 2 people on the same planet in June of 2006. I am particularly interested in the spaces between things. So for example, it is the spring of the year 1300 and you are Dante, and you are walking through hell with the ghost of a poet, and your lover is still dead. But her absence is the boundary within which this entire mythology is formed. She is not in the world, and yet through that absence, the entire world and the world beyond becomes her. It is created by her, and it is molded to her. Absence of something is proof that something existed in the first place. The breath between words allows speech to be comprehensible. Silence is the prerequisite for communication. I'm currently in the midst of a long-term deadline-free project inspired by my weekly Foucault reading group. This group is made up of 3 actual academics and then also me. In this project, I'm attempting to pull all of the beautiful lines out of an entire year's worth of lectures in order to create a poem that can act as a through line. I'm hopefully going to be doing this for all of the College de France lectures. I just started with Society Must Be Defended because that was where I jumped into the reading group. Anyway, here on the screen, you can see a section of the first poem that was created in this series and the pages where each line was found. This poem doesn't exist until the things between those lines are removed. The implied line that is being drawn between disparate pieces of text to find a sort of path is the actual work. The drawing is the space between. In the same way that you hold your hand out to feel the heat of a candle flame or a bonfire, it is not the object, but the space between you and the object, also a sensational space of touch that you feel. We touch the echoes of things that are too dangerous, violent, or sad in order to feel the truth of them without getting consumed. We can feel the ghosts, but not the bodies. There is an entire world of the in-between and invisible. Everything can be found, even if not understood, in the abandoned and the overlooked. All that truth that gets tied up in the search for meaning and ignored, the airwaves, the heat outside of the fire, the breaths between words, and Beatrice. The implied line between things is a tightrope with an infinite number of high wire acts balancing at the precipice of a fall. That is the space where the sacred really exists. This is about the pieces of string that are too short to save, the pile of salt after looking back, the mud at the bottom of the last river, and being witnessed by the remains of something that was once important. The absence of the thing is the thing itself. The second aspect of drawing, around which I orient my work, is storytelling. The definitions of drawing that I have used here in regard to storytelling are to pull or drag something such as a vehicle so as to make it follow behind, to pull or move in a specific direction, gently pull or guide someone in a specific direction, move somewhere in a slow and steady way, come to or arrive at a point in time or a specified point in a process, or pull curtains, blinds, or other such coverings shut or open. In Borges' lecture on Dante, found in his collection of lectures called 7 Nights, he says, "Poetry always remembers that it was an oral art before it was a written art. It remembers that it was first a song." So what then do we call the choking fragments of our girl Sappho? Time is, after all, a brutal editor. In these fragments of unintelligible songs, we are left with more truth and less melody. What are we to do with the self-composed modern decompositions of an old song? What is the truth without the music? What does it mean when your work cannibalizes itself and comes through chewed, broken, and maybe better? Lost the plot, lost the melody, maybe found the truth? Or does convolution speak better than plain language? What are we reaching in song that we cannot reach in words? There's a neurological function of your brain, which you may already know about, where every time you attempt to remember something, your mind starts new. It takes the previous memory of an event or an object, and it rewrites your neurons into a new version of that event every time you try to remember. So the more you try to remember something, the more detached from the original it becomes. We eventually rewrite reality into story. We do this so many times that they become virtually indistinguishable. Every trace of ourselves is a story. We tell stories to remind ourselves of the truth, and the stories are what deny us the truth. We are a fiction, a fabricated but well-researched reality of multiples. We need to document and repeat ourselves in actions and objects and stories in order to confirm that we exist. The ritual retelling of our lives creates a new mythical non-space, a history that is neither true nor false, one which has been turned from foggy memory into stable narrative. In his story, The Library of Babel, the same Borges as above, posited an infinite library of the universe containing an unknowable quantity of untranslatable books. And so too is there a dichotomous library of self, knowable and unknowable. The library from which we draw the materials to create ourselves in the day-to-day grind of living a human life is made up of stories, yeah, but it is also made up of amorphous mists of hopes and experiences. It contains everything from the soft, chewy taste of possibilities to the old, sharp corners of past hurt. Some terrible, some wonderful, some that if we could control the curation, we would ask be swept under the rug for the sake of their sheer banality. Once, a man stopped me while I was biking up the side of a mountain and told me about how he had lived in Germany for the past 15 years after being stationed there in the army as a 19-year-old. He told me how he had fallen in and out of love and come back to the mountain whose foot had been his childhood home, how he had seen a bear on that first night while roasting hot dogs over a garbage can fire behind a house without electricity. He told me about how he still missed the woman whose language he never quite got the hang of, how he had missed at the time the familiarity of words in his native tongue, but how he now had no one to which he could speak them anyway. Then he handed me back my tire pump and waved me on. This was neither the first nor the last time that someone approached me with this kind of thing. I've had the hopes and dreams of strangers laid at my feet in line for coffee, heard entire family histories while scraping ice off of my windshield, and found strange men waiting for me next to my car at a gas station to tell me about their work history in the once dying and now dead manual craft of graphic arts, which is another way of saying printmaking, which is what I do for a living. The people who tell me these things most often do not give me their names. They don't call me later. Usually they just let these little pieces of themselves hang in the air, breathe, and walk away feeling, I'd expect, a little more real. We make these libraries of ourselves, and then in trying to live, we obfuscate them. We give them away piece by piece until we are buzzing hives of humanity, made from little pieces of others. It doesn't matter much that these stories are true or false, only that in drawing them through time, they are yours, and then they are not yours, and then they are someone else's. The third and final aspect of drawing around which I build my practice is that of utopia. For utopia, the definitions of drawing that I have attached are to take in a breath and to formulate or perceive a comparison or distinction. This is a representative set of images of the content that can be found on a YouTube channel called Andre Will Do It. In these videos, Andre, I presume, he never names himself, will take a knife, a tool, some kind of equipment, and through beautiful, repetitive labor, he will restore it to its original, or perhaps better than original, form. There's something very deep within the human psyche that wants slow, steady, repetitive movements. The movements present in prayer, weaving, bandaging, cooking, any number of small but necessary tasks all mirror each other, and they are all incantations of intent. Please keep Andre in mind as we go through this section together. He will come up again. The 1976 cult classic science fiction film Logan's Run, Ursula K. Le Guin's 1974 novel The Dispossessed, and the 2015 cinematic release Mad Max Fury Road all have the same plot. That plot is going to find utopia and turning around because utopia is unreachable unless you are building it yourself every day with your bare hands. In his 2009 book, Cruising Utopia, Jose Esteban Munoz writes, "The here and now is a prison house. We must strive, in the face of the here and now's totalizing rendering of reality, to think and feel a then and there. Some will say that all we have are the pleasures of this moment, but we must never settle for that minimal transport. We must dream and enact new and better pleasures, other ways of being in the world, and ultimately new worlds." In a lecture delivered at Southern Illinois University in 2014, Angela Davis said, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time." Miriam Kamba wrote, "Hope doesn't preclude feeling sadness or frustration or anger or any other emotion that makes total sense. Hope isn't an emotion, you know, hope is not optimism. Hope is a discipline. We have to practice it every single day." So here's where we find utopia, in both an endless futurity and the everyday. It exists only in the working towards making it possible. Utopia is unreachable because the very act of reaching is where it exists. Utopia is an everyday chore, an hourly practice, a devotional monotony. There's an old folk superstition in parts of New England that requires, in the event of a beekeeper's death, telling his bees what has happened. You must drape their homes in mourning cloths and make special funerary offerings. There are even specific recipes for cookies for bees in the event of their mourning. If you do not do this, they will all abandon their hives. In this act, we try to push something incomprehensible, both grief and the vastness of nature and behaviors of creatures therein, into something that we can understand. We do this through ritual, through draping the harsh and profound reality of the natural world in the trappings of our human feelings. And in doing so, we create something very small, very kind, and beautiful. Kepler renamed the planets from heavenly bodies into unholy rocks in the 17th century by applying logic to their actions. We apply our thinking to the things we cannot understand. This is a failure only in the same way that memory is a failure. It does not manage to put something so vast and untenable into our pockets. But in the attempt, we make something else that is its own kind of holy. What does it look like when we create our own fleeting utopias in the search for what is not possible? Where is our holy mundanity most clear? When I lived in St. Louis, I lived in an apartment with a laundry room that charged over twice the amount a regular laundromat would charge. I am also bad at timing things that are not work-related, and I had the erratic sleep schedule of a graduate student at the time. So given these factors, you would not be surprised to know that I spent a considerable amount of time doing laundry at odd hours in Tiny Bubble's 24-hour laundromat in South City, St. Louis. I've already mentioned that strangers will often tell me their stories unprompted, and that was certainly the case here as well. Someone in a Cardinals shirt spent an hour on the intricacies of chess as a metaphor for life. Another told me about his current experimental diet of grape nuts soaked in soy milk, which he referred to as human dog food. Another about his job at the bar down the street and his regulars whose lives he had a vague but rather serious grasp on. But the laundromat wasn't the same as the grocery store lines or back alley shortcuts of my normal interactions with strangers bearing stories. Even when there is no confession, the laundromat is still liminal. The spaces I have inhabited for the majority of my life are spaces in which no one has their own washer or dryer. Instead, usually on Sunday afternoons, bogged down with weeks or months of dirty fabrics, whole apartment buildings, whole city blocks worth of neighbors, congregate in dark, warm cinder block buildings and set to work wringing the city out of their clothes. The laundromat is a liminal space, and the common work of washing allows for relative strangers to know each other. They, or we, are connected through our basic needs. The low hum of fluorescent lights smooths over the desperate rattling and breaking of broken machines. This is a hymn for the everyday. Pants, towels, underwear, all sorts of unmentionables bundled into sacks, hung out to dry across balconies, little flags waving in the late afternoon dust of spin cycle communion, reminding us that we are alive. In the cold blue light of tiny bubbles, a threshold between moments, we worked alongside the temporal ghosts of everyone else that day who had also laid their clothes out on long blue tables, folded, shuffled, and lived in that room. All movement, all forward motion. Here we come back to Andre. 3 years ago, Andre Will Do It posted a video entitled Unexpected Rescue and Restoration, Real Horse. Here suddenly, amongst all of these inanimate objects, these cold pieces of metal and rust, there was a living, breathing creature. The video contains exactly the same content that his knife restoration videos do. He takes a horse that had been neglected and ended up somehow in his workshop, and slowly, through repetitive motion and gentle but precise craftsmanship, he restores the horse. The ending is simply a continuation of that horse's life, but this time happier, safer, and cared for. In his 1999 essay, Some Remarks on Kafka's Funniness, from which probably not enough has been removed, David Foster Wallace writes, "No wonder they cannot appreciate the really central Kafka joke, that the horrific struggle to establish a human self results in a self whose humanity is inseparable from the horrific struggle. That our endless and impossible journey towards home is, in fact, our home." What is utopia if not the act of reaching towards and never touching home? Wallace, describing the quicksand of Kafka's bureaucratic fantasies and the utopia of popular imagination, are both, perhaps despite appearances, hopeful gestures towards a place we currently live and we will never leave. The place of the unknown between certainties. This hope, or joke, as much as a mirror, allows us to see ourselves. Utopia is an opportunity. It is a reflection, but so are we, in the way that we play out our lives, from carving our names into wooden desks during homeroom, to building fantastical perpetual motion machines, to holding the impossible in our hands, to the way that a stranger's life will continue to live with you. It is a reflection that simply we are not alone, that the blip of humanity on the endless chart of time exists in the very building of our collective reality, the implied line between now and utopia. It is the hope that Kafka was right, and that we were always home, here in the reaching forward. In this discipline of drawing, cobbled together by nature and containing multitudes of meaning, is it not our right and our obligation to enact a utopia of reaching, ceaselessly, for something that cannot be reached? Can the real face the imagined? Is a restored horse utopia? Can ghosts witness? Are two pieces of bread pressed into opposite sides of a planet a sandwich? And is this a drawing? Thanks. Thank you for listening to that and for coming on that journey with me. Before I switch to my Q&A slide, before I switch to my Q&A slide, I wanted to explain what's on this page, which is on the right-hand side is what I consider the most important drawing I have done the last year and a half. It is the mind map of the current body of work that I'm working on. And then on the left is one of those big woodcuts in process, which I also consider a drawing. I'm going to switch to my Q&A. I didn't make this image, even though it doesn't have an attribution. I could not find it, and I'm pretty good at finding where things come from on the internet, so that says something. But a student this year sent this image to me and said it reminded them of me, so I think it is appropriate. Oh, wrong button. Q&A. Does anybody have any questions, comments, things you want me to go back to? I'm happy to flip back to slides. Or we can all just kind of chill out and have an early evening.
No. This we can go through the awkward silence a little bit and get some questions. I mean,
I like the silence.
Somebody definitely has an opinion about
the sandwiches.
What the sandwiches. Yeah. So please, y'all don't hesitate to jump forward and.
Really?
Going with the sandwiches, Tim, can you expand on what happened with the bread on
on the different
board? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this was like an early 2000. I'm trying to get back to the slide. An early 2000s like performance art experience. Essentially, a bunch of people did a lot of cartographic work to figure out where opposite sides of the earth were that wasn't just ocean, because like most of the United States, like the continuous United States, you go through and it's just ocean. There's not a place to be. And there was this tool that was created, which I'm pointing to with my little mouse here, that did like a whole map of the earth. This guy, Zay Frank, had like a huge following of people. So like all of the people who watched his videos like did all of this work and communicated with each other in order to put pieces of bread on opposite sides of the earth at the same time so that it existed for a moment. A very gross earth sandwich. For those of you who need the chart.
I mean, when you put it that way, then definitely how can a hot dog not be a sandwich?
This is my thought, but again, I'm very willing to have people fight with me.
Well, the hot dog is connected. It is sort of like one single bread. Adam Lutzker has a comment. Does a sandwich require symmetry?
I don't know, Adam, does it? What's an asymmetric?
Mine tend not to. They tend to fall apart when I'm eating them. So if you don't get your earth sandwich exactly symmetrical, is it not a sandwich or just a sloppy earth sandwich?
I don't know. Is it? I think it's a sloppy earth sandwich. I also think that they did figure out that the first pieces were placed like this as opposed to like actually perpendicular. So it would be a very sloppy earth sandwich for you to make it like that.
And then once even if you have a perfectly symmetrical sandwich, once you start eating that sandwich, that first bite, it becomes no longer symmetrical. So does the sandwich cease to exist in that way?
Yeah, how does a sandwich exist in time? This is a real question for anybody who would like to speak up. I'm also happy if you want to know actual things about actual pieces of work or how they were made. I am happy to talk about those as well. Or just keep going with sandwiches.
I'd love to hear more about the work of the, I don't know how to pronounce, Divine Comedy.
Oh, the Divine, yeah, this one?
The previous one.
Oh.
Where is it? This one.
This one? Sorry, I was flipping too fast and I missed.
This one. Oh. It just
There's a little delay.
There.
Oh, okay. Am I on the right one, Edward?
You are in the right one, yes.
Okay, what about this would you like to know?
Well, what are the considerations, or where are the meeting points between the work and the work of Dante? Yes.
Yeah, so it's specifically about the idea that I was talking about briefly in the talk about the way that like the entire world and universe of the Divine Comedy is kind of built around an absence, and like a very specific absence. This is about the sort of like, I don't know, I like the unsatisfying moments in there. Like you have all of this like really like beautiful metaphor and allegory in hell, but it's still about the sort of like the absence and the continued absence of this person who is gone, to oversimplify an extremely complicated text. But this piece in particular was about the sort of revealing and veiling that can happen. So the way that this is made is it's white silk screen and pieces of string printed onto a piece of paper and then waxed so that it's transparent. So these little, I didn't actually put an open, like an open actual shot of this. It's a book. And when you open it, all these hands are revealed to have little pieces of string tied around their fingers as like a memory, a language to like speak about memory. So it's this like, as an object, you see kind of like chaos and perhaps like a little bit of horror in there. And then when opened, it's like simply these ghostly arms with little memories attached. I also saw, does that answer your question? Thank you. I deeply oversimplified Dante there and I feel kind of ashamed about it, but I guess this is not the time. Adam also said, can you say more about Foucault and your drawing? Adam, what do you mean?
It's Billy, not Adam. Billy's here too.
Oh, Billy, what do you mean?
I'm just kind of intrigued that reading Foucault would change or impact your drawings, and I'm wondering how that happens.
Oh, totally. I think honestly right now the biggest thing in Foucault that I'm fascinated by and interested in as it relates to my work is the idea that like of like counteraction, and that like you can kind of find what something is through the responses to it, if that makes sense. So it's that same sort of like implied line, except obviously in Foucault it exists through like societies, but in art it exists through like visual tricks and ideas. That makes sense. So yeah, like the counteraction thing.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Billy. I'm also happy to talk about this laundromat, which I found out closed as I was doing research for this talk that I'm really sad about.
I have a question kind of prompted by Tiny Bubbles experience. Sure. Or I think you kind of mentioned it a few times, but with the idea of the sort of unsolicited stories that you come across from people. Is there an example? Can you give us an example of an unsolicited story that you have shared with somebody? Is there kind of like a go-to story that you have sometimes, or?
That's a really good question, because honestly, there isn't. Usually I am the receiver of these things. I'll find myself like literally standing in line and somebody will say a pleasant everyday thing to me, and then the next 20 minutes will involve the rest of the things that they've thought about. I think maybe like the one time that I had like a truly collaborative conversation with somebody who was trying to have me like witness them, I guess is the term, was I was, again, previously mentioned, I kept very bad hours when I lived in St. Louis, and I used to kind of wander down back alleys at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I had no real sense of self-preservation. And I have this like old military jacket from my dad that I was wearing because it was winter, and I ran across this guy who was coming at me in the other direction, and we were both clearly like, you know, people walking through back alleys at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a certain like energy that comes with that. And he was also wearing a military jacket, and instead of just doing the normal like passing by thing, he stopped and he started talking to me, and he told me about his jacket because we had like a similar fashion thing that also came from his dad, that also like was in the same sort of era of military world, and we kind of had this like weird connection over this like the draping of the self and like the objects of parents, but also like not really participating in the things that they represent. So we had like a very weird moment. I think that was the only time it's been like truly two-way. For the most part, strangers do just come up to me and be like, this is my life, tell me nothing, I would like to tell you everything. I see somebody also who's, I don't know your name because it's a series of letters. I think that represents multiple names. How did I create the bees, the telling the bees here? This one? This is embroidery. So embroidery floss. Oh, Abby and Jeannie, hello. This is like a standard sized handkerchief. It actually used to belong to my grandmother, but she is now dead, so I have it. And I spent probably 6 months just embroidering this tapestry. It's supposed to look vaguely like moss, but it isn't like actually representational. And then the object itself, you just kind of crush up and throw somewhere, and that's how it's displayed. So it's like the idea of telling the bees, as it were. Ooh, have I done anything with human hair? I have not. A dear friend of mine did Victorian hair art for a long time though, and it seems like a very exciting space. I'm kind of like afraid, I think. I don't think I have the guts to do real human hair work. It seems like mostly a shared human experience, and it's aligned.
What are you afraid about with the hair, Emmeline?
I don't want to touch it. But that's cowardly. I should just suck it up and do it, because art is not cute and it can be gross. I am kind of afraid, because I do kind of work in this world that like does occasionally reference the idea of like grief or mourning. I'm afraid to get too didactic with it. And I feel like if I engaged with human hair, it would all be Victorian mourning stuff, but I think it's so beautiful. So I don't have a great answer there. I'm having a little trouble understanding the second half of that question, but I would love to answer it if I could understand it.
I have a quote written down from you about like how you like the laundromat because it's like you're connected by basic needs. So it's like, I just thought that hair kind of tied into that. And because you start off talking about lines, so it's like, I feel like hair is kind of like a line. So that's just why I put that in.
Yeah, that's a line. How do you feel about hair art? Like, do you make hair art?
No, but I feel like I'm on the same page as you. I don't know.
Because it's too gross. I should get over it, for sure. Yeah, I'm afraid now that a student is on this call. You should make gross art. It's fine. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay.
Emmeline, this is Krista. In your graphic organizer, your last slide before the beautiful attacking Q&A bird, which I loved, in that graphic organizer, your bottom right corner in a big circle says repair. Yeah. And I was just really drawn to that. And I'm intrigued by the idea of repair with respect to our horse friend, and also sort of the scraps and shreds and little tiny, teeny pieces. And so I just want to hear you say things about repair.
Oh, thank you for asking that question, because I think repair is the sort of core of everything that I'm thinking about. I think like everything that I mentioned both in this talk and like that I talk about in other work or like artist statements are actions that are attempts at repair. And I think Utopia is also about repair, hence all of these arrows going directly to repair. I keep trying to use this mouse for a different thing. Like ritual, like the idea of some kind of God, like the action of like helping or witnessing each other is all trying to repair something that maybe is like unmentionable or doesn't even have like a boundary. It is simply an absence that we're all trying to kind of sew back up together. If that makes any sense at all. But I do think repair is like a core human need that we're all kind of working towards. And I think aesthetically that ties into a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's amazing. That I want to read a book with you. I have a book I want us to read together. And also I just want to thank you for making my brain do things it doesn't normally do at this time of the semester. You're incredible.
Thanks, Krista. I want to read that book, whatever it is. Can also leave us on this beautiful knife duck. Also, if anybody knows where this came from, I would love to know. Like I went through, it took me like, sorry to constantly be flipping. This image took me like 6 hours to find the source for, but I did it. And I was completely laid low by that duck image. So if anybody has knowledge, I would like to know.
The original source of the image?
Yeah, I can't find it. This one I did have to like, I reverse image searched. I went through like, people, thank God, are like obsessive fans of Power Rangers. So there are breakdowns of every single monster in the original like 1990s runs. But yeah, anyway, so I was completely laid low by the duck. If you find the original source, I would love it.
You kind of gave us some insight to I mean, some of the YouTube references, and is there anything online, Emmeline, that is sort of like a must go to, whether it's like Instagram or I don't know what else you might be on, but is there something online you're like, you guys got to go see this? I feel like you have something good to.
I feel like the horse restoration is really important. It's also, I should warn you, it's not like a well edited, it's like not choppy and fun, but it is like just very lovely. The same person has a cat restoration video, which also is great. I've honestly, this is probably embarrassing, but I spend most of my time watching like old digitized VHS carpentry instructional videos, which is perhaps not the recommendation that you would like. I have mixed feelings about Instagram in general. But yeah, sorry, that's not a very helpful thing. The spaces that I find like internet goodness in are kind of, they're accidental and they're not really like well collated into something I could recommend, except for the horse restoration video, which I would very much recommend. I mean, you should totally follow me on Instagram or something. I don't.
There you go. You got it.
But that's not.
There's another comment or sorry, question in the chat box.
Ooh, my drawing in the wood. Are you talking about this stuff? Eric? This one? Drawing in the wood. I'm going to assume yes. Yes, excellent. Okay. So these actually, I'm using the word drawing very broadly here. These are carvings. So this is like a big chunk of wood, and then all the area that's black is raised, and all the area that is not black has been carved away physically. That's what that process image on the last slide was about. In these, I'm actually like directly talking about the stuff that I was talking about in the Utopia section. So these are about the sort of like spaces and actions of like mundanity, where human beings can like witness each other and there's a holiness. And I'm playing, you can see like with I'm pointing to my own desktop, which is helpful, with the references to these Orthodox hand symbols. I'm using the language of that to talk about things that are extremely mundane, like folding a shirt in public. and pulling things together. So that's what those are about. Those are about like the literal intersection of the holy and the mundane and the way that we sort of see those things. And you're looking at in process versions because I'm not done printing them because I can't use the print shop until the students leave. So I'm still waiting to actually print those. So that's what I'm talking about there. I do a lot of woodcuts. I think I only included 2 in this, but it's one of my sort of favorite processes within the realm of printmaking. Thank you, Eric. I think we have 10 whole minutes left. If anybody has final questions, I don't want to drag you through it. I'm also very reachable in general. If you want to email me things, message me on Instagram, which is the only real social media I have. And I feel conflicted about it. I would like to throw my phone into the ocean, but alas, we live in this time.
I have a question. Hi, Emmeline.
Hi, Katie.
I'm not sure if this is totally fully articulated, but I was curious to know. I feel like very aligned with a lot of the things you were saying about the mundane and the holy. And I was wondering if you feel like the in-betweenness or the slipperiness of those things change somehow when it's then kind of centered or meditated on through the work itself. Like, is there something there that shifts for you, or do you feel like that's a way to investigate, or does it seem like almost this impossibility, like the reach you were talking about, or like what does that feel like for you when you're making your work?
Katie, that's such a good question. I think, and like, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that the work itself is a way to stay in that unstable space with like a grounding. I don't think I ever like I don't think I ever find a space that is like less slippery within that through the work. I think it is just a way to be in that space. But that's a great question that I have not thought about before. Yeah, like a way to inhabit those spaces.
And just like be in the slippery kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, like live in this slippery space between things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, I liked what you said about convolution is better than plain language. I don't know if you were quoting someone or if I was just sort of that was your words, but it made me similar to that, like sort of being slippery is sort of provides more opportunity in a way. And I wrote that down because sometimes so much what I say I think is like not well articulated or is convoluted and it's like not making any sense. But I could reference what you said to be like actually it's sort of revealing something else that is, maybe I'm doing it right now. See, I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, like talking around something.
Yeah,
will also be the thing. Totally. Yeah. I that's very helpful to me to think about it that way. My partner is a copy editor and she's having to read some of my writing right now, and could attest to the fact that I too don't really know what order words are supposed to go in, but I still hope to get something out of them. Yeah.
And that's where it kind of falls or hedges more towards art and poetry, right? Sort of ambiguity.
Yeah. That's the only space I feel comfortable. I don't know about everybody else on this call, but I feel deeply uncomfortable in the space of the rigid and secure, and only comfortable in the ambiguous.
In which we, before everybody came on, we were talking about your artist statement that you provided for the Drawn Out Conference, which is online, drawnoutconference.com. But how, thinking about students and their sort of exposure to a range of how artists present their work. And of course, the audience that you are reaching is important to that. But, I think we're kind of in agreement that we're sort of, it's okay for us to be unclear and uncertain and ambiguous and convoluted because, we're making art.
Yeah. And art is convoluted. It's like an entirely different language. So why would we use something like stable to talk about it?
Unless your professor gives you a particular rubric to follow.
Exactly. Thank you. Stuff around for the last 30 seconds. Yeah, I'm very pro saying a bunch of words, not necessarily in a good order, and hoping something sticks. Again, unless you're a student and your professor gives you a rubric.
For those of you online, you should go, check out either Emmeline's website, or you can access that through the Drawn Out conference, or we could probably paste it here in the chat box too.
Sure.
But this way you can get a sense of the sort of verbiage that she's using. And
I didn't actually make that a link. Sorry.
that's fine.
Also, representation of people who are bad at the internet. I do own the domain for myself, but I can't figure out how to attach it to my website. So there you go. Get the carbonmade.com branding associated.
I'm fine with that. I like that you have the simplified version, but you don't use it.
I don't know how. It's fine. I'm now exposing my complete lack of technological ability, despite the fact that I'm referencing like tech stuff in this talk. But yeah, feel free, email me anytime, send me messages if anybody has questions. I am very open.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and I guess close out, unless you want to stop me, somebody, and ask a question or a comment or something. But otherwise, Emmeline, thank you so much for this. Your contribution to the Drawn Out conference is greatly appreciated. We're glad to have you part of our cohort here. And I know we have some of us online attending the talk. Those of you that are here, if you think of this as being of some sort of interest to you, maybe to others, please feel free to stay, tune in to us online. And there'll be our next talk is with Lisa Walcott, who will be, I believe, early February. So the conference will go on a break, a bit of a little hiatus. And thank you all for joining. Thanks, Emmeline.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thanks. Happy winter break. Safe travels.
Bye. Thank you.
See ya. Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you so much for your
Bye, Emmeline. Yeah, thank you. Bye. Take care.
Thanks, bye.
See ya.